In the high, clear air of the Southern California coast, a peculiar tension hung over the Clampett estate. It was not the sort of tension one might find in a boardroom or a formal gala, but rather the restless energy of a family preparing for a righteous struggle. Granny, with her silver hair tucked tightly under her bonnet and her eyes flashing with the fire of 1,000 ancestors, stood ready. She turned to the young man beside her, her voice crackling with determination as she declared that she was ready for the fight. The target of their preparation was an enigmatic force known as the Grunions. Young Jethro Bodine, possessing a mind that often wandered into the tall grass of confusion, stood by, eager but bewildered. He had heard that they were going down to the beach to help fight off the Grunions, but the identity of these invaders remained a mystery to him. When he asked who the Grunions were, Jed Clampett, the steady patriarch of the clan, could only offer what he had heard from their banker friend, Mr. Drysdale. According to the news, the enemy was coming in from the ocean that very night to invade California. Granny, never one to face an enemy without proper hardware, looked Jethro up and down and demanded to know where his weapon was. Jethro proudly displayed a simple slingshot. Granny scoffed at the idea, insisting that one could not bring down an enemy with such a toy. Jethro, stubborn in his youthful confidence, insisted he could. The two fell into a rhythmic bickering, a chorus of can and cannot that echoed through the mansion. Jed eventually stepped in to halt the dispute. He reminded them that they could not have bickering amongst themselves when they had to fight together against the Grunions. Jethro, still seeking clarity, asked who these folks were. Jed explained that they were the people fixing to invade California, citing a newspaper headline Mr. Drysdale had shown them. The headline warned of a huge invasion predicted for that night. Mr. Drysdale himself had appeared in uniform, toting a gun, and appearing ready for the fray. Jed noted that it must be a desperate situation when an old-timer like Mr. Drysdale felt the need to fight. Meanwhile, at the bank, Milburn Drysdale was reveling in his own deception. He boasted to his secretary, Miss Thompson, about his brilliant performance. He had convinced the Clampetts that a state of military emergency existed and that the Grunion were a fierce, warlike people from the island of Grun. Miss Thompson, perplexed by the cruelty of the lie, pointed out that Grunion were merely small fish. Mr. Drysdale dismissed her concern. His goal was to prevent a young man named Mark Templeton from quitting the Navy. If Mark left the service, he planned to spend $48 million of Jed Clampett's money on oceanography research. To Drysdale, any cause that removed $48 million from his bank was far from marvelous. The tension at the bank escalated when Miss Thompson mentioned that Miss Hathaway had resigned under similar pressures. Drysdale threatened Miss Thompson, but she remained steadfast, even hinting that she could cook his goose with a single word to Mr. Clampett. Drysdale, ever the opportunist, admired her unscrupulous side, suggesting they could work well together. He ordered her to hide the newspaper, satisfied that the Clampetts were thoroughly deceived. Back at the mansion, the preparations were in full swing. Jed ordered Jethro to load the truck and bring it around front. He placed a flag on the vehicle, hoping to inspire the local folks by letting them see their colors flying. When Granny questioned if it was the official state flag, Jed reminded her that they were in Southern California and things were done differently there. Granny also made sure the victuals were ready, ordering Ellie Mae to ride shotgun over the food to ensure it actually reached the truck. She even insisted on bringing her big cooking kettle, envisioning a long siege where they might have to live off the land like Mosby's raiders. As they were loading, a strange vehicle approached. It was a dune buggy, a contraption the family had never seen. Granny wondered if it was an early arrival of the Grunion. Instead, it was Miss Jane Hathaway. She explained that her car had been repossessed by Mr. Drysdale and she was now driving the buggy, which was designed for soft sand. When she mentioned she was going to the beach because the Grunion were coming, the Clampetts assumed she was joining the defense. Miss Jane, unaware of the family's misunderstanding, explained that thousands of Southern Californians would be flocking to the beaches that night in pursuit of the elusive Grunion. The Clampetts, thinking the locals were rallying for war, were impressed. Miss Jane invited them to use her little gray shack at the south end of Malibu as their headquarters. Jed was moved by her spirit, noting that she must be from Dixie because she was defending the south end of Malibu and parking her car on the Robert E. Lee side. With the truck loaded and the medical bag packed, the family prepared to depart. Before they left, Granny insisted that Jed give an inspiring speech to the troops. Jed, though reluctant, stood before his family. He acknowledged that they were not born and bred in California, but the state had been good to them, and they would not run and hide when trouble started. With the speech concluded, they headed for the coast. At the beach, the atmosphere was festive for the locals, but somber for the Clampetts. Miss Hathaway met with a friend named Helen, offering her a gift of Grunion she had kept in her freezer. Helen remarked that they looked like small fish, noting it took about a dozen to make a meal. Miss Hathaway's mood soured when she learned that Mr. Drysdale was in the garage auctioning off her repossessed car. When Drysdale appeared, he informed her he had sold the car for $25. When she asked who the buyer was, he smugly admitted that he had bought it himself. The Clampetts, meanwhile, were navigating the unfamiliar terrain of Malibu. Jethro, behind the wheel, was as lost as a goose in a snowstorm. They eventually found a lonely stretch of beach that Jed deemed perfect for a defensive position. They began to dig in, setting up a revetment, and raising their flag. Jethro's hunger was a constant distraction, but Jed insisted on scouting the area first. Jed took a look through his telescope and spotted a figure out in the water on a flatboard. He assumed it was a Grunion scout spying on them. He noted that the poor soul wasn't wearing much clothing and was likely half frozen. Ellie Mae offered to swim out and bring him in, but Jed advised waiting for the enemy to make the first move. Miss Jane soon arrived at their camp. She complimented their revetment, thinking it was a clever way to shield their fire from the wind. When Jed mentioned they aimed to fire at the Grunion, Miss Jane corrected him, explaining that Grunion were captured by hand. She described them as small, defenseless creatures that struggled at first, but were easy to handle. She mentioned that they were taken by the thousands and that many people took them home for a delicious dinner, as they fried especially well. This news left the Clampetts confused. They began to suspect the Grunion were not the fierce warriors they had imagined. Jed watched through the glass as more people appeared in the water, riding small, slippery boards. He marveled at their poor seamanship as they fell off repeatedly. He concluded that if Jethro took his brain to the island of Grun, they would surely make him king. Hunger eventually won out over military strategy. Granny began preparing a feast of ham hocks, chicken, and beef stew. Ellie Mae, meanwhile, decided to investigate the beach. She returned shortly with a prisoner. It was a young man in swim trunks, carrying a surfboard. She proudly announced she had caught a genuine Grunion from the island of Grun. The young man was cold, hungry, and completely bewildered. When Ellie Mae demanded to know if he was a Grunion, he eventually agreed just to end the questioning. Granny, seeing the scrawny lad, took pity on him. She offered him a seat and a plate of food. The young man, delighted by the meal, used the word groovy to describe the gravy. Granny, ever the linguist, assumed that was the native tongue of the island of Grun. Jethro, not wanting to be outdone, went out and captured his own Grunion, a young woman who had also been out surfing. She, too, was lured in by the promise of ham hocks and hot corn bread. As the two young people sat by the fire, eating the best meal of their lives, they realized they were both supposed to be Grunion. The Clampetts watched them with a mix of pity and fascination. Granny noted that they couldn't even tell each other apart and found the whole situation pitiful. As the night wore on, the fear of invasion was replaced by the warmth of hospitality. The Clampetts realized that while the Grunion might be poor sailors and lack a bit of sense, they were appreciative of a good meal. In the spirit of the hills, they invited their guests to set a spell and take their shoes off, proving that even a misunderstanding of military proportions could end in a peaceful dinner by the sea.